Greetings and salutations, everyone. I am, as always, Darth Devious, bringing you another video review, and this time, part 5 of our look at Middle-earth history. And we'll be looking at, from Toy Biz, the Gandalf the White figure from the Two Towers line. There he is in the package here. This is another figure I got for free. No, I'm not going to tell everyone how I got it for free. That's a story for me and my friends to know. He does have a gimmick, which is one thing. It actually kind of works against him in places, but we'll get into that. He has a staff extending action, which means he pretty much holds his staff in his right hand, which is really supposed to be his sword hand since his sheath is on the left. But it is what it is. We'll figure it out. So I'm going to get him out of this package, which he's been in since about 2002, and we'll take a better look at him. We'll compare him with Gandalf the Grey, and we'll get into Middle-earth history. Be right back. Okay, here's Gandalf out of the package, and I managed to get his left hand to actually hold his staff pretty good, so that's not too bad, even though it's meant to be in his right hand for the gimmick. We'll get into the gimmick in a minute. Out of the package, this figure has a huge problem. And that's his feet. His feet are way too loose to support him. You kind of need his staff to support him, especially his left foot. His left foot's really bad. Yeah, it's an old figure. It is what it is. There's not much I can do about it. As far as the gimmick goes, there's a button back here on his back. And what that does is it makes his hand go up and down. So yeah, if you have his staff, it makes his staff go up and punch people in the face. So there you go. If you look at his face, got a nice face sculpt. It's a little red. I don't know why it's coming off red, and he's got a very dirty nose. Gandalf the White needs to take a bath, I guess. His head moves better than Gandalf the Grey's. And I like the design of his outfit. I mean, Gandalf the White was a much different character than Gandalf the Grey. I mean, when he came back, he was sent back for a purpose. He became, as one person put it, Gandalf the Grey was all about loving people, especially hobbits and things like that, and loving the good of the earth. Whereas Gandalf the White was a general. He was sent back to lead. He was sent back to help overthrow the forces of Mordor. And that's what he did. He was a much different character, much harder, much grumpier, more focused on his task. And he also comes with Glamdring, which, if I can get it out of the sheath, this Glamdring is a lot thicker than the other one, which I'm going to bring in the other Gandalf in a minute, and we'll compare the two. And I'm not going to try and shove it in this hand. It's molded to go into this hand. So, there's that. It's just, I'm using this left side to hold him up because his left foot sucks. Yay! His staff keeps sliding up his hand so he's not standing right. And he's kind of in like this off-white cream colored outfit. There's some nice detail on it, and the cape's nice. There's some nice gray detailing back here. His hair looks kind of cool. For a figure that came out in 2002, this isn't that bad, and it doesn't have as much articulation as the others. I mean, nothing at the wrists. This arm, you got better articulation than this one because of the gimmick. You can't really do anything with this. His legs have some decent articulation. His knees don't want to stay in place, though, because of his bad feet. But he does have ports for a stand, which is one thing that the Bridge Direct figures don't have. So, he has that going for him. Let me bring in Gandalf the Grey, and we'll compare them. See, Gandalf the Grey is a little bit smaller, but, not by much. I mean, they're both still the same basic size class. It's just that Gandalf the White is just a little bit bigger. And we'll look at his Glamdring. His Glamdring is, I think a little bit... This one from Gandalf the Grey, I think is a little bit closer to what the actual on-screen version looks like. This one's got too much roundness to it, you could say. I don't know. It's bigger. I mean, you know, not you know, insanely bigger, but it's bigger. It's just I think this one looks better. So, kudos to the Bridge Direct. They made a better Glamdring. So yeah, they both have their good points. They both have their bad points. This one's bad point is he can't stand, no matter what I do. Unless he's leaning on his staff heavily. Gandalf the White has had way too much to drink. But the staff's kind of cool. I like how, you know, his staff did change. I'm not going to take it out of his hand, but his staff did change when he came back as Gandalf the White. And, you know, it still had that organic look of coming from tree branches, but it was more defined. So, it's still good. So, that's going to be it. I'm going to have these guys stand here now, and we'll go into the Middle-earth history, which is all about the coming of the wizards. Be right back. Alrighty, Middle-earth History Part 5, The Coming of the Istari. The Istari are the wizards, if you haven't figured that out yet. So, Sauron is defeated at the end of the Second Age. The ring is cut from his finger by Isildur. Isildur refuses to destroy it. He himself is killed just a few years later, and the ring is lost. So, a lot of Sauron's forces after that point were driven away. The men of Gondor and Arnor pretty much, you know, drove them into hiding for a while. And even the Nazgul seemed to have vanished. But by the time you start getting into the first 1,000 years of the Third Age, the forest of Greenwood the Great, which is on the other side of the Misty Mountains, on the other side of the Anduin River, which most would know as Mirkwood. It started to have a darkness come about it. Evil started to go against it. Now, in the south of Greenwood the Great, there was a great hill. It was the highest point in the forest. And a fortress was begun construction there. This became the fortress of Dol Guldur. And it was here that, for a very long time, Sauron's spirit, you know, started to recuperate at this fortress. Now, Dol Guldur was pretty much across the Anduin River from Lothlorien. So, he pretty much started building it there as a thumbs up to the elves in Lothlorien. Basically, Galadriel and her husband Celeborn. So, as the shadow was growing, the Valar, they kind of realized Sauron's going to come back. They needed to do something about it, but they had made a vow at the end of the First Age to not directly set foot on Earth again. The last time they did that, they broke the planet, pretty much. They, you know, that's when Beleriand was cast into the sea and, you know, things like that. It was just a disaster for everyone involved. They decided, well, we're just not going to show up in person. But we need to do something. So they decided, you know what? We have our Maiar. They follow us. They pretty much do what we need them to do. Sauron's a Maiar. What better way to go against him? But they didn't want to send them to rule over the free peoples of Middle-earth. They wanted them to be sent as advisors, wise men, to teach them how to resist Sauron and his forces, how to fight back, how to, you know, just to advise them on what to do. But they were also sent to track down the ring and make sure it didn't fall into Sauron's hand, so that he wouldn't come back to full power, and, if possible, destroy it. So they chose 5. The ones they chose were Curumo, Iwendil, Alatar, Palando, and Olorin. And they decided they were going to send them to Earth in the guise of old men. And they became known as the Istari, or Wise Ones, which eventually they became known as the Wizards. Now, we're going to focus on Olorin, because out of all the Maiar, he was considered the wisest. And he was a Maiar to Manwë, the chiefest of the Valar. And Manwë pretty much chose him, said, Olorin has to go. Olorin approached Manwë and said, I would like out of this. I really don't want to go. This just isn't for me. I'd rather not. So Manwë asked him, he says, why do you not want to do this task that I'm putting forward to you? Olorin looked at him and said, I fear Sauron. I fear his power. I do not think I can go up against him. Manwë looked at him kindly and said, all the more reason for you to go. So each of the wizards showed up pretty much one at a time. And they would take a ship from Valinor, which would go through space, since Valinor was now off of the Earth. And it was only the white ships that went in and out of the Grey Havens now that could go back and forth between Valinor and the Earth itself. And they would come to the Grey Havens, Mithlond, where Círdan the Shipwright would meet them. And he would, give them names based on, what they look like. For example, Curumo he named Curanir, but men would come to know him as Saruman the White. Alatar and Palando, nobody knows what their names were. They were never recorded. When they came together. They were dressed in blue. They were just known as the Blue Wizards. And they went to the Far East and were never heard from again. Nobody knows what happened to them. Nobody knows what. It's just, they vanished from all of history after that. Iwendil, who was always a lover of nature and animals and things like that, he was dressed in brown, and so Círdan named him Radagast. And he, focused more on animals and nature. Now, Olorin was the last to arrive because, as I said, he didn't want to go. He was nervous about it. Well, Olorin showed up, dressed in grey, and Círdan bestowed upon him the name of Mithrandir, or Grey Pilgrim. But as everyone knows, he became known more as Gandalf the Grey. Now, realizing how wise Olorin was, Círdan had in his possession one of the 3 rings, Narya, the Ring of Fire. Now, as many know, Gandalf had the power to, manipulate fire. And fire didn't have an effect on him, which is why he was able to fight the Balrog and not get burned. And it's because when he showed up at the Grey Havens, Círdan, realizing his power, realizing his wisdom, gave him Narya, the Ring of Fire. So Gandalf secretly carried it with him for his entire life. Even when he was Gandalf the White, he still had that ring. And most people didn't realize that he was one of the ring bearers. So, now as for the Istari themselves, the wizards themselves, now, since they were Maiar, they were basically immortal. Sort of like the elves are immortal. I mean, you can kill an elf, you could kill a wizard. They, could succumb to the same damage as any normal human. They could also give in to greed, a lust for power, things like that, as you see with Saruman. how he was, easily swayed with power, and he, as his time here on Middle Earth increased, Saruman began to lord over men, which is how he ended up with the Tower of Orthanc in Isengard anyway. Gandalf, or Olorin, or whatever you want to call him, out of all the 5 wizards, was the only one to complete the mission he was sent for. Now, when he died fighting the Balrog, because he did die, even the Valar couldn't have brought him back to life. It was Iluvatar himself that brought him back as Gandalf the White, because his mission was not finished. And Iluvatar knew, out of all the wizards, Gandalf was the only one who would complete his mission, which he did. So, yeah, not much else to say about the wizards. Gandalf would, involve himself in a lot of things. Now, when he first arrived, one of the first things he did was go into Greenwood the Great and go up to the fortress of Dol Guldur. Sauron fled before him. Fled to the Far East to recover for a while. He was in no shape to go up against a Maiar at all. Gandalf did this a number of times over the course of the next 2,500 years. He would go to Dol Guldur every few hundred years and chase Sauron's spirit out. Now, things in Middle-earth did not go that easy for the next 2,000 years. In the next part, we will be discussing the rise of the Kingdom of Angmar. And I'm going to try and get all the way through the events leading up to Bilbo going on the quest for Erebor, which will pretty much finish off Middle-earth history. Because all the stuff with Angmar is pretty much what led to what they called the Watchful Peace, which was the 500 years of peace they had before the War of the Ring broke out. So that's going to be it. This Gandalf figure, not as good as this one simply because of his bad legs. But if you see it and you can get it cheap, it's not bad for a display piece if you want a Gandalf the White. I know there's another version of Gandalf the White that doesn't have a gimmick. You might want to look into getting that instead. But this one's still not bad. And as I said, they both do kind of resemble Ian McKellen in their own right. This one I think has better eyes for Ian McKellen. This one just all over his face looks more like Ian McKellen. But it is what it is. So yeah. If you want a good Gandalf figure, get the Bridge Direct one from The Hobbit. That's a good Gandalf figure. You want a good Gandalf the White figure? Skip this one. Try and find the other one. It might have been under the Return of the King line. I can't remember. So that's it. You guys all be good. I'll talk to you next time as we conclude our look at Middle-earth history in the next part. And what figure am I doing? You'll have to wait and see. And I can tell you right now, it's not Treebeard.